the consequences of sin. And we are now, as a people, as a nation, ignoring the consequences for sin. Let me give you an example. Some people would say, well, you watched a particular show and all you pointed out were the bad things in it. Didn't you realize that that show had a really good moral to it? That it had some family positive thing in there that you should have gotten from that. Folks, I want you to understand. People could make a porn movie that has the moral in it not to lie. If we buy the context of the moral of the show, everything built around the moral is ungodly. And everything around the moral is drawing us into sin. It's drawing us to the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the boastful pride of life. We are like somebody who has cast a fishing line out into the water with the moral of the story being something positive, don't steal. And in the midst of it, we are buying into all the trash that they built around it, and we're being caught, and our children are being caught, and our grandchildren are being caught and reeled in to some of the most filthy stuff that you can imagine. And so today, as we watch the clip, I want you to think of this passage. We're going to start the clip in just a second. We're going to watch some just like we did last week. Imitate God, therefore, in everything you do, because you are His dear children.
Live agenda or a fundamentalist soapbox? Listen to this insightful statement. The moral importance of entertainment is something which has been universally recognized. A man may be judged by his standard of entertainment as easily as by the standard of his work. Where do you suppose that came from? You might be surprised to find out that it was part of Hollywood's Motion Picture Production Code in 1930. That production code, which was meant to be a set of self-regulating guidelines to keep unacceptable content out of motion pictures, was not a reflection of morality and decency in Hollywood at that time. It was the result of a general public outcry due to risque content in films being produced, as well as off-screen scandals in Hollywood. In 1921, nearly 100 censorship bills had been introduced in 37 states. In order to stave off the state laws and the potential of federal censorship laws looming on the horizon, the film industry hired a man named Will Hays, who led a successful public relations campaign of industry self-regulation. In 1930, Will Hays adopted the production code that was written and submitted by a Catholic priest. Listen to this example from the general principles. No picture shall be produced that will lower the moral standards of those who see it. Hence, the sympathy of the audience should never be thrown to the side of crime, wrongdoing, evil, or sin. This checked Hollywood for a season, but over the years, the industry continued to press the envelope in order to draw audiences. By 1968, the code, which had been continually changed, skirted, or liberally interpreted, was replaced by a new rating system.
Asking Hollywood to regulate itself, in my mind, was rather like shipping lettuce by rabbit. But a fellow by the name of Jack Valente, who at the time was an aide to Lyndon B. Johnson, came to the fore, and he rescued Hollywood and developed the motion picture ratings, which became then the new standard by which films were evaluated. It doesn't take very long for people to realize that there was an unintended consequence from that new rating service, because it created a ratings category, R, for which there had never been a movie allowed in a movie theater prior to that time. And so that was a very unfortunate consequence of the new rating system. We created this study where we evaluated 3,200 movies over 15 years. And we went to a media research company and also to a statistics department of a university, and actually had them collect the data and evaluate it. And we found that in the 15-year period, Hollywood had produced 12 times more R-rated movies than G, while at the same time, the average G-rated movie had made 11 times more profit than its R-rated counterpart. So that really rocked their world in Hollywood, and they had never really looked at films based on profitability, comparing that to the MPAA ratings. And so that opened a lot of eyes.
We can't complain about Hollywood with one hand and pay them money to do what we abhor with the other. I like to ask Christians, do you like R-rated movies? And they'll say, yeah, I do. I know I shouldn't, but I do. The way to speak to Hollywood is to speak to them through the box office. Withhold our money, and there are millions and millions of Christians that got our R-rated movies. This shouldn't be, and it comes back to a lack of fear of God. And is He our Lord, or isn't He? Are we living in holiness, or aren't we? Holiness means separation from sin and from this world. Nothing epitomizes this world as Hollywood. So why should we go to movies that epitomize the world? We really need to look at ourselves closely as the church in America in these days and say, what have we done? We've got rid of the fear of the Lord, which is the beginning of wisdom, the fear of the Lord from which men depart from sin. And we need to reinstate it, the pulpits and the pews.
Is the worldview and morality of Hollywood producers a faithful reflection of their mainstream audience? According to a survey of Hollywood writers, actors, producers, and executives, conducted in 1998 by the University of Texas, they found that only 2 to 3% attended religious services weekly. Kirby Anderson shares about a similar study.
Robert Lichter actually went out and interviewed the 240 media elite. These are people at the Associated Press and the United Press International, ABC, NBC, CBS, Time, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report, the Washington Post, and New York Times. What they found is that those people tended to be much more liberal than the rest of the population. They tended to be much more humanistic and secular than the rest of the population. They found that 86% seldom or never attend religious services. They don't go to church or synagogue. They don't know people that go to church or synagogue.
All too often, we have people in the entertainment industry who are not writing for the viewers at home. They're not writing for the audience. They're writing for their peers. And so they want to be able to impress their peers at industry events with, guess what I was able to get in my last film, or guess what I was able to get past network censors.
It's not uncommon to hear the following argument about media, but it doesn't affect me.
I've heard from young people all the time that says, it doesn't affect me. I could watch this movie and it doesn't affect me. This TV show, it doesn't affect me. And I listen to this music and watch these videos and they don't affect me. I play this video game and all these video games and they don't affect me. My simple response to that is, really? How do you know?
There's an unbreakable link between what we see and hear and what we do. You can't break that link. You can't think, I'll watch and I'll listen, but I won't do. God has joined them all. And again, that works the opposite way. If we are feasting our eyes and filling our ears with what's good and pure, then it will have that blessed effect on our outward actions as well, and will become a blessing to others.
I went to Los Angeles to meet with Tim Winter, president of the Parents Television Council, an advocacy group whose primary mission is to promote and restore responsibility and decency to the entertainment industry, and to discourage the increasingly graphic sexual themes and dialogue, depictions of gratuitous violence, and profane and obscene language in television programming.
When I was a kid, the rage was Tom and Jerry cartoons, and sticking a cat's tail in the light socket was going to breed a whole generation of imitators who were going to do that. I haven't stuck a cat's tail in the light socket in my lifetime. But what the scientific research does show is that prolonged exposure to graphic violence in the media does a few things. Number one, it makes kids more desensitized to real violence. Number two, it creates a bullying effect, that they see violence as a real way to resolve a dispute. A third thing is that it creates an unreasonable fear in the child of their circumstances, that the world around them is more dangerous than it is, and they behave differently because of it. It's interesting, we have a study coming out very, very soon that takes a look at animated programming, cartoons. There's now more sex in cartoons that kids are watching than there is violence. It's quite a change. Newt Minow gave a spectacular speech in 1961 to the National Association of Broadcasters Convention.
When television is bad, nothing is worse. I invite each of you to sit down in front of your own television set when your station goes on the air. Keep your eyes glued to that set until the station signs off. I can assure you that what you will observe is a vast wasteland. You will see a procession of game shows, formula comedies about totally unbelievable families, blood and thunder, mayhem, violence, sadism, murder, Western bad men, Western good men, private eyes, gangsters, more violence and cartoons. And endlessly commercials, many screaming, cajoling, and offending. And most of all, boredom. True, you'll see a few things you will enjoy, but they will be very, very few. And if you think I exaggerate, I only ask you to try.
When I met Newt a couple of years ago, he said that I described in 1961 television was a vast wasteland. Now it's a toxic dump. And he's right.
As content continues to be an issue with entertainment, it seems that people are becoming more numb to the change going on. Does the proverbial frog in the kettle apply to media content as well?
Things are unquestionably getting worse. If you want to follow that up with a question as to why things are getting worse, I think there are probably a number of factors at play. One certainly being that we, the public, become inured over time to certain kinds of content. And so in order for the filmmaker or the TV producer to elicit the same kind of reaction from the viewer, they have to constantly up the ante. Years ago when Phantom of the Opera was a big Broadway success, the Kennedy Center here in Washington, D.C. did a screening of the original black and white Lon Chaney film version of the Phantom of the Opera. And before the screening, they shared with us the fact that at the time the film was released,